Welcome to a series of interviews to celebrate South Asian Heritage Month. Today I'm joined by Nita Sharma. Welcome, Nita. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you, Jenny. How are you?
Yeah, really, really good. I'm quite excited about this conversation. I've had a few conversations on this topic and I find them really enlightening. I learn a lot and I'm always happy when I'm in the learning space. So looking forward to our chat.
Great.
So
So am I.
Good, good. So I'm going to start with my first question, which is, what does South Asian Heritage Month mean to you personally?
I think what it means, Jenny, is a celebration of our depth, our vast spectrum of different Asian heritage within the labeling of Asian Heritage Month. And the richness and the complexity that people from different parts of Asian heritage can actually bring, rather than in years ago one size fits all.
Mm,
So for me, it's the richness, it's the complexity, it's the we're not all the same, and it's also about sharing to the world. We're not just about dance, music and food, that
mm,
there is or being brilliant at maths,
mm.
but there is just so much more around for us, and what people need to know, particularly, I guess, individuals who maybe don't encounter many people from South
Mm,
Asian heritage, really. So they have maybe
mm.
very a narrow perspective of what that means, really.
Yeah, that's such a good point. I think the minimizing of people sometimes too, as you said, dance,
Yeah,
food, music, etc. But also thinking that it would be just one food and just one
yeah,
dance, and
absolutely.
and realizing, not that understanding that you're not a monolith. There's so much diversity within the diversity. So
Absolutely. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. So, tell me a bit about your family's heritage within South Asia.
So I was born in Delhi, so I'm
Mm,
of Hindu Punjabi background,
mm,
and my parents came over after the partition, so they experienced everything in the partition, and but they relocated to they got married just before the partition, so got relocated to Delhi. So we are of Hindu Punjabi background, and we're I guess quite complex in terms of the way we kind of do things in our family. And my parents, who came into this country, my father came originally in '63 um, to do a course on not housing, catering management, and then
mm,
decided, oh, this might be a good life for my children. He actually got cited and sponsored from an individual who was called Sir William, who owned one of the oldest Indian restaurants in the UK called Vera Swami's. It still exists today, but it's
wow.
a new version of it. So he took a shine to my father and said, "You are a great worker. I want to sponsor you, and I want to sponsor you to come and
Mm,
do a course." And
mm,
of course, then we were brought over. I was young, and which I didn't want to come actually.
mm,
Um, and we came, and of course, rest is history. And I think my parents, um, they expanded the circle, but originally there was just us. And what I observed of my parents, they worked incredibly hard. My mum didn't speak any English to
mm,
start with, and my father worked quite long hours. But she was, I get my strength, my determination from her, because she was, rolled up her sleeve and said, "Right, I'm going to go out and get myself a job,"
wow.
and started doing, unskilled work, and then, progressed herself into being actually a union rep, which was really
Mm,
interesting.
mm,
Um, and my parents' heritage is education was always very important,
right.
and they never actually at the same time trust, and I'm always very grateful for this, is, in terms of religion, they were religious. I was brought up very much as a Hindu,
Mm,
but they never quite thrust that thing down our throat.
mm,
And I think the other thing which my parents did quite well in the context of Indian heritage, in South Asian heritage, is they allowed us to grow individually, and the five of us, there are five of us, we're all have done different things, and I always see my parents as being a bit like an elastic. They've stretched, they
mm,
challenge, and even though the discomfort that they've experienced because we've set outside of the Asian cultural boundaries, they've actually haven't said to us, go away, we're going to disown you. And I would say
mm,
I grew up in the 80s, in the late 70s, 80s, where there were a lot of, individuals from Asian, South Asian households where, there was runaway girls and,
mm,
because they wanted, and my parents, I would say, didn't even occur to them. They said,
uh,
we're uncomfortable, and we don't like this. I mean, I bought my first house at the age of 27,
mm,
and unmarried,
yes.
wasn't the lack of trying on their part.
Ah,
And yet they still said,
mm,
okay, we'll give you a deposit, off you go, really.
ah,
So,
wonderful. Yeah,
so
yeah.
that's for me was a really an important part of my upbringing and permission giving that my parents gave me.
Amazing. What pioneers. I think people underestimate the bravery of leaving everything you know to go and start a
Yeah,
life in a brand new country. And, even more challenging for your mum who did not speak the language as well. It's
yeah,
such a leap
yeah.
of faith, isn't it?
Yeah,
I-
absolutely, absolutely.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And I imagine they saw a lot and experienced a lot. Maybe not all. It's great that your dad received that sponsorship or, advocacy from Sir William you mentioned. Was that a white English person or
Yes, yeah, yeah.
yes,
He
yeah.
was a white English person.
Yeah.
And I will say, Jenny, that, the house my parents bought, who were very determined to buy their first house,
Mm,
um, we the some of the houses on our road in Clapham where that are my parents' home is,
mm.
said, no blacks, no dogs, and no Asians, or things, something like
Yes.
that, on
Yes.
by sometimes by even Spanish people who lived on
Right.
our roads.
Oh,
We're not renting.
wow.
So
Gosh.
I grew up with, those
Mm,
kind. Both my parents, I know, experienced enormous amount of racism and sexism.
mm, mm,
But they took it, really. They took it because
mm.
they had a very different approach to the way we did now.
Mm, yes, yeah, yeah. Thank you for sharing that. So, yeah, I guess sometimes people see things, they just think, well, it must have been easy, and people are not talking about it.
No,
So, but it definitely wasn't, and with five
no.
children as well, to feed.
Abs- Absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely. Yes.
So you mentioned a Hindu Punjabi upbringing. You mentioned, being born in Delhi. Are there specific cultural traditions or practices that you still feel connected to, even though you had quite perhaps a liberal family upbringing? Are there some traditions that you held on to and still do or still remember?
Yeah, actually, and it's interesting. My parents, there's a phrase that somebody used: you can take a Hindu out of the country, but you can't take Hindu out of inside yourself. So
Right.
I'm a very strong. I have a sense of my core identity. I'm a Hindu, and that whilst
Mm,
I'm not a, like my elder sister who's very much practicing. I
mm,
still, we have traditions around. I have a Ganesh in my house. I have several, actually,
mm,
3 foot tall as well, in brass. So my parents really, there were certain rituals, certain religious ceremony, has been very important for, that I still practice, not on a daily basis, but I observe.
yes.
Um, Am
Can I
I?
can I
And
stop you for a moment?
yeah.
And
Mm.
so I'm thinking there'll be some people watching this who don't know what Ganesh is, what it looks like, what it
Right. Ganesh
symbolizes.
is, yeah. Ganesh is the elephant god,
Hmm.
and he represents protection, and it's something that you do. You know, when you buy a home or new car or
Mm,
anything new, Ganesh is the first thing that you put in your house because
mm,
it's a
mm,
protector. It's
mm.
for good luck and it's a protector, basically. And if you know, people will recognize it because it's
Yes.
probably maybe along with Lakshmi, who's the goddess of money that you
Mm,
see around Diwali.
mm.
He is probably the most prominent, prolific image that most people would recognize.
Yeah.
Yeah, that part of
Thank you.
it. So,
Yeah.
well, thank you for asking for clarity because I was obviously making an assumption here, and I think there are certain traditions. Um, I still don't eat beef.
Mm,
I still observe certain practices of not washing my hair. I know in my head it's
mm,
irrational. I
mm.
still do it. My daughter says, "Why do you?" And I go, "No, I don't know. I still don't do it."
Yeah.
So there
Yeah.
are certain practices that I still follow. And I love, it's like in the English equivalent to, the Lord's Prayer. There's
Mm,
also, we have a prayer as well, which I can get into the spirit of it really quickly,
mm, mm.
and it sort of brings me back to my childhood days. When we,
Yes.
as a family, used to
Mm,
do certain prayers.
yes.
So and obviously Diwali and certain events was a big event for us during
Mm,
that time. But also, it's interesting because death. When someone passes or marriages also become so I do observe what happens, what's the protocol. I don't know the details of it. I rely on my elders to show me the
mm,
way, but I
mm.
do observe those practices. I mean, I had I'm my husband's English Irish, and I had a Hindu wedding. I
Mm,
insisted, and
mm.
28 years later I go, my wedding day is the 27th. My husband goes, well, registry wedding's the 26th. I said,
Ah.
no, the 27 counts.
Yeah.
So for me, that was very important to have, um, a authentic Indian wedding for me, rather
Mm.
than just have the sort of civil ceremony, really.
Yes, thank you. So I'm going to ask you two just quick, brief questions about a couple
Yeah.
of things you said. What is the significance of not eating beef and the hair washing that you mentioned?
What is it's to do with the cow. So
Hmm.
the cow is a sacred animal
Hmm.
in Hinduism, and
Yes.
Krishna, who's also one of the Beatles, really made the image of Krishna
Hmm.
prolific in the
Hmm.
60s, and
Hmm.
Krishna is always with a cow. So in
Hmm.
India, a cow is a sacred animal,
Yes.
and so most Hindus may not eat. I mean, obviously, people do. Hindus do. I
Mm.
have friends of mine who are Hindus who eat beef,
Mm.
but I don't. I mean, my
Mm.
sister-in-law goes, "Well, it's not Hindu beef; it's English beef." So I go, "Well, it doesn't matter to me. I'm not eating beef." So that's the significance of
Uh-huh.
that.
Okay.
And washing hair, Jenny, I think it's the ones on Thursdays. It's almost like you mustn't cut your hair, you mustn't wash your hair, mustn't wash.
Mm.
I think I have no idea, but it's
Mm.
so in my core that I
Mm.
cannot do it.
Mm. Mm. Fair enough.
And the one on Tuesdays where you don't eat meat or eggs
Mm.
is to do with Hanuman, who's again he's a deity of one of the sort of gods, and he's a monkey god. So, and
Okay.
in religious, in the sort of what are they called? Ables um, Diwali, there's Ram, Sita. I don't want to get into details, but
Yes.
Hanuman is the monkey god, and it's his day on Tuesday. So that's
Right.
one of the
Okay.
reasons we don't eat. I do
Yeah.
cheat now and again, Jenny. I will say that. I'll have a I'll have a I'll have a cake which has eggs in it. So I'm not
Okay.
completely.
Yes. No, it's just great to know, because I think sometimes people make judgments and they don't understand why. And
Yeah,
if I think about the Catholic faith, for example, we have Lent, where when we're supposed to give something up, we have
yeah,
reasons why we do certain things. And
yeah,
I think it's always helpful for people to go into a little bit more depth and understand the
yeah.
reasons why, and not make judgments about people's faith or where they come from.
Absolutely.
So this interview is particularly because you are an awesome member of the Diverse Executive Coach
Thank you.
Directory. You are a highly experienced, accomplished coach who is always learning and always bringing something new to the field. Yeah, one of the pioneers in the coaching field, because you've been doing it a really long time. Um, One of the things about the coaching field is that a lot of the books, the courses, etc., it's quite informed by wisdom from the West, really, quite American,
Yeah.
Eurocentric, etc. So I'm curious around, the values of your heritage, or um, some of the thinking from your heritage, and how you maybe bring that into your coaching, or how it informs your coaching in any way.
I would say, Jenny, that one of accompanying my coaching has always been an area that I think as a sort of even before I did my first job, I wrote my thesis around women. No, actually, the impact of the video technology on Asian households. This is part of
Mhm.
my undergraduate, no, actually postgraduate degree, that a master's I did. And the other one I did was around women, Asian women and work, and particularly around the 60s when, there was, I can't remember the name of the company, Kodak. There was a lot
Mm,
of protesting. So what's always been in my DNA is around inequality and
mm,
inequity.
mm,
And my two theses were really around exploring some aspects of that. Now, I entered, even though I was a graduate trainee in housing management, I chose to shift from that to work within area around equality and diversity way back. And I think my coaching, and even though the courses, you're absolutely right, I'm now much more fussier about the courses
mm,
I go to. I mean,
mm,
I was looking at something around neuroscience course that came through the ITU, and I'm going, well, where's the sort of global mature, where's the diversity content in
mm,
all of this? So
mm,
I've become much more fussier
mm,
because in looking at where is their lens into that, and in terms of my coaching, I suppose the work that I've done on the ground around the dynamic of differences. I wouldn't have said that then, but
mm,
the inequality, the different lenses that
mm,
we look at, and who's in front of me,
mm,
and where am I in relation to that? I think as a coach, very strongly, knowing who I am and
mm,
what I'm bringing and where my own biases are and where
mm,
how I'm looking at things. But actually also about having a solid, grounded sense of me, I
mm,
think has been an important part of my coaching practice. And I think over the years, what I've done is I've added to it. So an example would be, when I'm doing coaching with somebody cross culturally. I was coaching an individual from Hungary yesterday.
mm,
And so for me, my alertness is around, I just can't use the kind of standard procedure. What do I need to pay attention to in relation to this person. And I think that has come about, as I said, it through my lived experience. It's also come about that I've been exposed to, some coaching practices where courses where they have put the dynamic of differences in the heart of it. And they've made it a big chunk of it, that all the lenses go through there. And I think that, and my own confidence in challenging what I'm experiencing, the courses that I go on, has made me think about things. Well, how does that apply to individuals who might be ethnically different, really? And it's interesting because yesterday I posted a book that's come out called Angry Women. It's written by and I thought, oh, I'm going to read it because it's a subject. I think there is, maybe, I'm probably now at the stage where I just think I'm not going to put up with rubbish anymore. So I will say something more than I would have done 5 years ago. And I'm interested in their content around, is it inclusive of us as women who are different, or is it white middle class women, really? Because who I've, in the coaching world, that's who I trained with, and I've had some awful experiences with that set of women in some aspects where I felt, I'm not them, I'm the other, really. So, and those painful experiences, I think, are also an important part of my own growth, because I can recognize that those were very, very painful experience, whether it was self-inflicted or whether it was experienced because of the culture I was in. They nonetheless actually inform me of what's important for Nita Sharma as she practices her coaching, really.
Yeah, thank you so much. You said so much there, which would be a whole nother conversation. There was just so much that made me think about anger, rage, who's allowed to be angry, who's not, the coaching profession itself and how inclusive it is. But I guess the key thing that I took from it is actually you bring your whole self to your coaching. And you notice and you see people where they are, and use those lenses to help you help them, which I think is really important, because I think so much in coaching previously has been, let's ignore anything that feels a little bit different, and so much is missing from the conversation as a result. Thank you. So coming to the end of our conversation, it was far too quick, really. But I'd love you just to leave us with maybe a tip or a question to help people. So during South Asian Month, if South Asian Heritage Month, if people want to educate themselves or think more about this month in terms of how inclusive they're being, how much they might need to know to be an ally to others, or even as in the coaching field, perhaps they're coaching someone with South Asian heritage, or a coach who has South Asian heritage who might want to think about how they bring more of themselves. So any tip or any thought that you want to leave us with?
Oh, there's lots. But a couple of things I suppose that occur to me is something that you said earlier on, Jenny, is that, we are multifaceted, complex, and it's about, remembering when you're having a conversation with somebody or people from South Asian heritage, that you might get different things, and it's about the lenses that you look at, or that you're hearing things from, and being cognizant of that. The other thing I would say in coaching is, whether you're someone of South Asian heritage or whether you're coaching, is always put the dynamic, don't be afraid to put the dynamics of differences in the center when you're doing your contracting. And
Mm,
if you have that space, I mean, not every time, if I have 2 sessions with someone, I don't do that. However, if I'm working with somebody maybe deeply or for 3 or 4 sessions, I I'm more likely to put the dynamics of differences in that space to say, even I notice we're different. How might
mm,
we might exploit that, or how might that get in the way? And if it does get in the way, how will you tell me as a
mm,
part of our feedback? So for me, sometimes I think we're a bit afraid to say that. And
mm,
if you just make it as a part of the contracting, because it's going to interplay anyway, and
mhm,
it's present anyway. So why not make what is implicit going on to
mm,
making it more explicit, really? So that would be my one of my top tips around, you know, uh, whether you're a coach from, as I'm sort of South Asian heritage, or whether you're coaching some, be curious, be
mm.
curious that, I still trip myself up, always. And I think even, something I heard, you might have heard it on the radio this morning, about a 9-year-old Asian girl who's absolutely amazing at chess, all sorts of, she was from South Indian background,
Mm,
and all
mm.
sorts of things were running through my head,
Yes.
about her and her family, and I thought, oh, okay, because it's a culture, although I'm very familiar with,
Mm,
I don't have, such personal experience, but what I was also thinking about, how are other people listening into that? Are they
mhm.
working on their stereotypes? Here it is,
Yes.
young Asian girl who's, absolutely amazing, and people going, wow.
Mm.
Anyway, so that's for me. I don't know whether, yeah, I think it's just be aware and be curious around yourself and what you bring around, South Asian heritage, really.
I think that's a beautiful message to leave us on. Be aware, be curious, don't make assumptions about
Yeah.
others. It's been an absolute pleasure to speak with you. I've learnt something, as I knew I would, and got to know you a little bit better,
Yes.
Nita, which is a real pleasure. So thank you.
Thank you, Jenny. I really appreciate the time. Thank you.